Don't smear the board, Professor Elaine Whitmore said, eyes narrowing at Maria's mop bucket. This isn't your broom closet. Maria kept wiping chalk dust near his Italian shoes. Then maybe stop kicking the proofs off the edge, she replied, steady but quiet. Her gaze flicked to the half-written equation. Carry that sign, and the series diverges. The words slipped out before she could stop them. The room stilled, students exchanging startled glances. If you want underdog justice in real time, subscribe now. New parts drop fast. And you don't want to miss the moment when arrogance collapses. Maria straightened, calm and unshaken, resting the rag on her cart like punctuation. I'm here to clean, she said evenly. Someone snickered. She didn't flinch. The mop handle clicked in her hands like a metronome. Rent was due. Sophia's inhalers needed refills, and the night shift meant fewer overtime hours. But what mattered now was simple. Finish the floors, keep her daughter steady, and hold her silence. Chalk dust clung to her knuckles, the air dry with limestone. In the back row, 11-year-old Sophia scribbled shapes in her frayed notebook, oblivious to the tension. Maria's mind skimmed the equation anyway, slicing through with muscle memory. Factor, isolate, breathe. Clean first, solve later. Where are you watching from? Because Professor Whitmore just chose the wrong woman to belittle, and she has no idea what happens when silence runs out. The projector hummed, the lights buzzed faintly overhead. Whitmore tapped the chalk like a conductor's baton. As I was saying, she announced too loudly, we'll complete the proof. She drew the bracket Maria had warned about. Chalk squealing across the board. Varsity jackets leaned forward. A girl in the second row angled her phone, recording. Power pressed like cold air through vents, unseen, but felt. Maria rolled her cart toward the aisle. The rear wheel thumped free of a cracked tile. She kept her eyes on the floor, though her mind floated above the board, mapping the problem like fabric seams. Eigenvalues, boundary value, a solution only if the sign flipped. Her heart didn't race. It steadied. A memory rose, her own chalkboard years ago, her name on the office door, a mug with initials beside graded problem sets. Then the layoffs, then the pregnancy, then silence, sealed in janitor's keys. From the doorway, Dr. Priya Das, interim chair, paused with her tablet. She'd once stopped Maria in a corridor to ask about leaking ceilings. Now her gaze snagged on the board, on Whitmore's confidence edging brittle. The contradiction arrived like thunder. Whitmore's numbers stranded into nonsense. She hesitated, then waved it away. We'll adjust with a perturbation, she said breezily. Whispers rippled. The girl lowered her phone. Sophia looked up, sensing the shift the way children sense storms. Maria's pulse ticked. Steady. She wanted no spotlight, only the floor finished, her daughter safe before buses stopped running. Still, the math thrummed inside her like a hymn. Her fingers brushed the mop handle's splinters. Tools carry memory. So do hands. She traced the correction in the air, invisible chalk in her grip. Flip, cancel, converge. A student near the aisle leaned aside. Ma'am, need me to move the bag? He whispered, half guilty, half curious. She nodded thanks, but kept walking. Not yet. Hidden strength was most dangerous when undeniable. Whitmore tried again, then again, every route circling back to the same brick wall. Her irritation sharpened. The subtlety is lost on the untrained eye, she quipped, tossing a glance at the janitor. Laughter. Thin, obedient, rose. Maria felt heat along her neck, then let it fade. Silence was armor. Priya stepped forward. Elaine! Her voice carried warning, but stopped there. The air glowed like ozone before lightning. Maria emptied a bin into her liner. Plastic crinkling. She looked up. Chalk dust frosted the board. An abandoned equation in the corner waited like a door no one opened. She saw it as a pianist sees a silent key and hears the note anyway. She steadied her hand on the tray lip. Not yet. Cleaning first. The reveal would come only when arrogance fell under its own weight. Sophia's notebook rustled. A small star constellation spread in the margin with the word Mom below it. Maria's throat tightened. She gathered the bin, angled the cart, circled away. The board would collapse soon enough. Floors would gleam. And the sign, on the proof, on her life, would flip when the moment demanded it. Maria angled the cart toward the double doors, their hinges sighing as she pushed through. The muffled laughter from inside still pressed against her ribs like an echo she couldn't shake. Chalk dust clung to her shirt sleeve, and she rubbed at it absent-mindedly, leaving faint gray streaks across the dark fabric. Sophia trailed behind, notebook hugged to her chest, quiet as always when tension still hung in the air. The corridor smelled of waxed linoleum and the faint tang of disinfectant. Maria let her mop clatter softly into its holder, grounding herself with the sound. She didn't need validation from people like Whitmore, but every barb dug into the years she'd worked to survive. Years when equations were her air, and now her silence was her shield. The hidden skill, the life she once had, pulsed beneath the surface like an ember she refused to let die. "Mom," Sophia whispered, her voice low but clear in the quiet hall. "Why'd she say that stuff to you?" Maria crouched beside her, brushing a curl from her daughter's cheek. "Because some people don't see past a uniform," she said. "It doesn't matter. We just keep moving." Yet her words didn't fully reach her own heart. The lecture doors opened behind them. Students streamed out in clusters, murmuring about the mistake they'd just witnessed. A tall boy with headphones slung around his neck muttered, "She didn't solve it right." Another replied, "Yeah, she hit a dead end." They kept walking, oblivious to the woman with the cart who already knew how to untangle every line of that proof. Dr. Priya Das stepped into the hall next. Her eyes found Maria immediately, hesitation flickering there. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but stopped when Whitmore's heels clicked onto the floor behind her. "Don't loiter, Priya," Whitmore snapped, adjusting her blazer. "Students need clarity, not janitors making the halls look like back alleys." Maria turned away, steadying her daughter with a hand on her shoulder. She refused to give Whitmore the satisfaction of a reaction. Yet inside, the words burned, scraping against the years she had spent teaching proofs to students who respected her, who listened with wide eyes as she explained patterns that shaped the world. They reached the elevator. Its metallic groan echoed as the doors slid open. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Maria pressed the button for the basement, where supply closets waited, their shelves lined with cleaners and spare bulbs, the space where she now belonged. As the elevator descended, Sophia flipped open her notebook. Across the page was the same unfinished equation, copied in her messy hand. She'd drawn arrows where she thought terms should go. "I don't get it," she murmured. "Why didn't it work?" Maria froze. Her daughter had seen enough to notice the flaw. She knelt again, lowering her voice as if confessing a secret. "Because the sign was wrong," she whispered, tracing the symbol with her finger. "If you switch it, everything balances." Watch Sophia's eyes lit with sudden understanding. "That's all?" "That's everything," Maria said softly. She felt the weight of the truth pressing down. Her daughter had no idea her mother once stood at the same boards, teaching the same theorems. That life had collapsed under bills, under pregnancy, under abandonment. But the knowledge hadn't left her. It waited, intact, for a moment when the world would force her to bring it back. The elevator dinged. They stepped into the dim basement. Pipes hissed overhead, dripping condensation onto concrete. Maria stacked bins into their places, muscles working automatically, mind already climbing back into equations. Each calculation was muscle memory, like walking or breathing. She caught her reflection in a steel cabinet, eyes tired but sharp, hands steady despite years of bleach and mops. There was a strength there, quiet but unbroken. The professor's mockery had only scraped at the surface. Beneath, Maria still held the precision of a mathematician. Sophia tugged at her sleeve. "You could have told them," she said. "You knew how to finish it." Maria swallowed. Not yet. Some truths need the right moment. In that moment, she realized something else. Whitmore's arrogance wasn't just an insult. It was a fracture. Every student had seen the error. Every bystander had witnessed her flailing. And when the moment came, when the proof stood like a wall no one else could climb, Maria would be there, unseen until she chose to step forward. The basement door creaked again. Priya's voice carried down the stairwell. "Maria?" Startled, Maria turned. Priya descended carefully, tablet clutched to her chest. "That comment earlier, I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Elaine, Professor Whitmore. She forgets herself sometimes." Maria forced a faint smile. "I've seen worse," Priya hesitated. "I noticed you looking at the equation. Did you—" Maria cut her off with a shake of her head. "I clean floors." Nothing more. But Priya's gaze lingered, thoughtful, as if she'd glimpsed something between the cracks. Without pressing further, she nodded and left. Maria exhaled slowly. The ember inside her flared. This wasn't over. Her silence wouldn't last forever. The mop water rippled as she dipped the head again, sloshing against the bucket's rim. Every sound, the squeak of the wheels, the hiss of the pipes, the echo of Sophia's pencil scratching across the notebook, became rhythm. A preparation. The proof haunted her, lines of logic weaving themselves across her vision. She closed her eyes briefly and saw it whole, resolved, elegant. A truth waiting to be revealed. And when it was, no mocking words, no expensive suits, no titles on office doors would protect Professor Whitmore from the weight of that revelation. Maria leaned against the mop handle, the rhythmic swish across the concrete floor slowing as her thoughts circled back to Priya's lingering gaze. She had cut the question off before it could fully form, but the seed had been planted. Someone had noticed, someone in authority. That made the air in the basement feel heavier, as if even the pipes overhead held their breath. Sophia sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, pencil moving furiously in her notebook. The girl hummed softly to herself, unconcerned, as she tried to copy down the equation once more. Each line was crooked, imperfect, but earnest. Maria's chest tightened at the sight. It was both pride and sorrow in one breath. Her daughter was brilliant in ways she never wanted to smother. Yet the life Maria had been forced into carried no room for textbooks or quiet afternoons spent solving puzzles together. It was survival first, curiosity second. She wrung out the mop, watching dirty water swirl back into the bucket. The smell of bleach clung to her skin. Her hands, steady, precise, once turned pages of journals and chalked proofs across long blackboards. Now they scrubbed grout. And yet, beneath the calluses, the knowledge lived on. The elevator dinged again. Maria tensed. She expected Priya's return, but instead, 3 students spilled out, their laughter sharp against the hollow basement. Acoustics. "She totally messed it up," one said, mimicking Whitmore's chalk strokes in the air. "And she blamed us for not getting it." Another snorted. Did you see the janitor standing there? Even she probably knew better. They laughed harder, their sneakers squeaking against the damp floor. Maria stiffened, grip tightening on the mop handle until her knuckles ached. Sophia looked up from her notebook, wide-eyed. The students noticed them finally, their laughter faltering. One mumbled, "Sorry," before hustling after the others. Their echoes faded up the stairwell. Sophia whispered, "They think you knew." Maria knelt, cupping her daughter's cheek gently. "People assume things. Don't let it bother you." But her voice carried more weight than she intended, because the truth gnawed at her. Yes, she knew. She had seen every wrong turn Whitmore had made. She could have ended the charade with 3 strokes of chalk. Later that night, when the halls quieted and doors locked, Maria pushed her cart into the lecture hall once more. The board still bore the ghost of Whitmore's scrawled proof, faint chalk lines left unfinished. She set down her rag and stared at it, the symbols tugging at her memory like an old melody. Slowly, she raised her hand. Not with chalk, but with her fingertip. She traced the correction in the air. Flip the sign. Carry the series. Balance achieved. She smiled faintly, a smile no one would see. Sophia, curled in the back row, called out, "You fixed it, didn't you?" Maria froze, then lowered her hand. "Go to sleep, sweetheart." But her daughter persisted. "Why don't you tell them?" "You're smarter than her." Maria's throat tightened. "Because the world doesn't always listen to people like me." Yet deep down, she knew the day would come when silence wouldn't protect her anymore. The next afternoon, Priya caught her again, this time in the staff lounge, where Maria was refilling a spray bottle. Priya hesitated by the doorway. "Maria, about yesterday," she began. "I know you said it was nothing, but I've seen people look at equations like that before. You weren't just cleaning." Maria kept her eyes on the bottle, twisting the cap back into place. "You're reading too much into it." Priya tilted her head. "Maybe. Or maybe you know more than you let on." Her words were gentle, but probing. She left soon after, leaving Maria rattled. That evening, Maria sat with Sophia over a modest dinner of rice and beans. The girl slid her notebook across the table. "I tried the problem again," she said proudly. "I think I almost got it." Maria studied the page. Sophia's logic wasn't perfect, but her persistence reminded Maria of her own students long ago. She corrected one line lightly, careful not to overshadow. "Good," she murmured. "Keep trying. Don't give up." Her daughter's eyes shone with determination. "One day, I'll solve it before you do." Maria laughed softly, but her chest ached. She didn't want her daughter to inherit the same silence, the same dismissal. She wanted her to be seen. That night, Maria dreamed of chalkboards stretching endlessly, symbols raining down like constellations. When she woke, the memory of Whitmore's smirk burned sharper than ever. The humiliation still lingered, but so did the equation. The ember inside her glowed brighter. She wouldn't reveal herself yet. But the cracks in Whitmore's authority were widening, and when the collapse came, Maria would be ready. Morning light spilled across the university's marble lobby, catching on polished floors that Maria had scrubbed only hours earlier. She wheeled her cart slowly toward the stairwell, eyes down, careful not to interrupt the streams of students rushing past. Yet every laugh that echoed in the corridor reminded her of the voices from the day before, mocking both Whitmore's mistake and her own silent presence. She had grown used to invisibility, but invisibility was different from humiliation. One was survival. The other was cruelty. Whitmore's voice carried down the stairwell before she appeared. She was already lecturing a group of graduate students, her tone sharp, rehearsed, designed to erase any memory of failure. "A small oversight," she said briskly, adjusting her silk scarf. Any true mathematician understands the deeper structure. Maria glanced up. Whitmore's eyes flickered briefly in her direction before sliding past, dismissive as ever. But beneath the professor's confident gestures, Maria noticed the tightness at her jaw, the forced brightness. The mistake had shaken her more than she admitted. That knowledge sat in Maria's chest like a quiet weapon. Sophia tugged her mother's sleeve, whispering, "She's scared." I can tell Maria pressed a finger gently to her lips. "Focus on your homework, sweetheart." But her daughter's observation lingered. Children often saw truths adults buried. By noon, Maria found herself assigned to the upper floors, the administrative wing, where walls gleamed with framed diplomas and oil portraits of past deans. The contrast to the basement was stark, air scented with expensive polish instead of bleach, silence instead of dripping pipes. Here, power lived in mahogany doors and glass conference tables. As she wiped down a brass railing, the doors to the largest conference room opened. Priya emerged, holding a stack of folders. Her eyes lit with recognition when she spotted Maria. She slowed her pace, as though debating something, then said softly, "That proof Elaine attempted yesterday. It's become a problem. Students are posting clips online. People are questioning her competence." Maria straightened. "That's not my concern," she said carefully. Priya studied her. "No, but I think you saw what was wrong, didn't you?" Maria hesitated, the rag tightening in her fist. She wanted to deflect again, but the weight in Priya's gaze pressed against her silence. Finally, she murmured, "It was a sign error." Nothing more. Priya blinked. "You're sure?" "Positive." For a heartbeat, the air thickened. Priya's lips parted, as though about to ask the question Maria dreaded. How could a janitor know? But she caught herself, nodded once, and continued down the hall. Maria exhaled slowly, heat rising along her neck. Another crack, another slip. That evening, the lecture hall was buzzing when Maria arrived with her cart. Students whispered in clusters, phones out, showing each other videos of Whitmore's fumbled equation. The professor stood at the front, her smile strained, trying to redirect attention with a new proof. Maria kept to the aisles, wiping down desks, but every syllable reached her ears. "Mathematics is about elegance," Whitmore declared, chalk snapping under her grip. "Not trivial errors." A boy in the third row raised his hand. "But the divergence, what about that?" Whitmore's face tightened. "It's irrelevant." The murmurs grew. Maria felt tension thrum through the hall like static before a storm. Sophia, perched quietly in the back, leaned forward, eyes wide. As Whitmore forced her way through another half-proof, Maria's cartwheel caught on a crack in the tile. The clang echoed, drawing every eye toward her. For a fleeting moment, silence pooled. Whitmore seized it. "Perfect," she said coldly. "Even the janitor interrupts when we're discussing higher logic." Laughter rose again, brittle and cruel. Maria lowered her head, pushing the cart onward. But inside, the ember roared. Every insult added fuel, and she saw it clearly. Whitmore had no control left. The proof was slipping through her hands, and the students knew it. Their loyalty was fracturing. Later that night, when the hall was empty, Maria returned with her mop. The chalkboard still bore Whitmore's unfinished work. She picked up a discarded stub of chalk, its edges rough against her fingertips. She hesitated, then wrote 3 swift symbols, correcting the fatal error. The equation blossomed cleanly before her, elegant and whole. Sophia gasped from the back row. "You did it!" Maria quickly wiped it away, heart racing. No one can know. But the truth was etched in her daughter's eyes now. undeniable. The ember had become flame. Whitmore's downfall was no longer just a possibility. It was inevitable. Maria's hand still trembled as she set the chalk stub back onto the tray. The board was clean again, wiped down to nothing but faint white ghosts. Yet Sophia's excited whisper echoed louder than the mop bucket's slosh. "You did it!" She leaned against the cart, breathing through the weight in her chest. She had crossed an invisible line. For years she had hidden behind silence, careful to leave no trace of her former self. Tonight, she had let it slip. Just for her daughter. Just for a moment. And it terrified her. "Mom," Sophia whispered again, patting closer down the aisle. "Why'd you erase it?" It was perfect. Maria crouched, gripping her daughter's shoulders gently. "Because people don't always see the truth as a gift. Sometimes they see it as a threat." Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded. From the doorway came a faint shuffle. Maria's head snapped up. Priya stood there, her tablet tucked under her arm, eyes fixed on the damp board. She must have walked in seconds after Maria erased it. Her expression was unreadable, but suspicion flickered across it like a shadow. "I forgot some files," Priya said quietly, stepping into the room. "Strange timing, I suppose." Maria's throat tightened. She forced a smile. "Long night." "Just finishing up." Priya studied her for a long moment, then nodded and left. But the silence she left behind was heavier than before. Sophia looked at her mother with wide eyes, whispering, "She knows." Maria shook her head, gathering the mop. "No, she suspects." That's different. But even as she said it, she knew suspicion was dangerous. The next morning, the university buzzed with tension. Students crowded the hallways, phones glowing with videos of Whitmore's stumbling proof. The clip had gone beyond gossip. It was climbing through academic forums online, shared with captions mocking her competence. Maria overheard snippets as she wheeled her cart through the corridors. She's supposed to be the best, and she couldn't finish a basic series. My tutor said the janitor was watching her the whole time. Like she knew that last line stopped Maria mid-step. Rumors were already weaving her into the narrative. She gripped the cart handle tighter, keeping her eyes down as she pushed on. In the afternoon, Whitmore stormed into the lecture hall ahead of schedule. Maria was still mopping near the back rows when the professor barked at the students gathering early. "Do you think mathematics is a game?" she snapped. "Do you think one error defines a career?" The room fell silent. Whitmore adjusted her scarf, face flushed with anger. "I will prove again that elegance cannot be reduced to gossip." She began scrawling across the board, chalk squealing with force. Maria lowered her head, but her eyes couldn't help following the lines. She saw Whitmore forcing her way down the same dead-end path, the same error looming like a cliff edge. And she knew, again, exactly where the correction belonged. Sophia tugged her sleeve from the corner. "She's messing it up again," the girl whispered. "Quiet," Maria murmured. But her daughter's observation rang true. Whitmore was unraveling. Midway through the proof, a student raised his phone again. Another whispered to his neighbor. Whitmore's chalk snapped in her hand. "You think you know better?" she demanded of the class. "You don't. None of you do." Maria felt the humiliation twist in her stomach. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was desperation. And desperation always left cracks. That night, back in their small apartment, Maria folded laundry while Sophia scribbled on her notebook at the kitchen table. "I want to be like you," her daughter said suddenly. "Not like her. You're calm. You know what's true?" Maria's hand stilled on a worn shirt. She looked at her daughter's bright eyes and felt the ember inside flare again. She couldn't keep hiding forever. Not if it meant teaching her daughter that silence was safer than truth. Later, as Sophia slept, Maria sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. She pulled an old folder from the back of the cupboard, edges frayed from years untouched. Inside were lecture notes, research drafts, and a letter with her name printed in bold. Dr. Maria Alvarez, Assistant Professor of Mathematics. She hadn't looked at it in years. Tonight she couldn't look away. The next day, the discovery began. Not with her, but with her daughter. Sophia had left her notebook behind in class, and a curious student flipped through it, seeing the copied equation corrected neatly in the margin. "Where'd you learn that?" the boy asked when he returned it. "My mom showed me," Sophia answered simply. The boy blinked. "Your mom's the janitor, right?" And just like that, the rumor spread further, not whispered, but repeated with awe. Not certainty, but enough to plant the idea in every corridor. Maria sensed the shift the moment she entered the lecture hall that evening. Students' eyes lingered on her longer, curious instead of dismissive. Even Whitmore noticed, narrowing her gaze at the murmurs she couldn't control. The ember inside Maria burned hotter. Her secret was no longer safe. The cracks were widening fast. Maria felt the weight of eyes on her as she pushed the mop bucket toward the back of the lecture hall. It was subtle, hushed, but undeniable. Students who used to brush past without a glance now lingered. Their whispers carried a different texture, no longer mockery, but curiosity. She caught fragments as she moved down the aisle. Her kid's notebook had the correction. Maybe she actually knew it. Whitmore noticed it too. She stood at the front, chalk poised midair, and glared at Maria with a sharpness meant to cut through whispers. "Shall we begin, without distractions this time?" she said, her voice honeyed with venom. The students stiffened, some suppressing uneasy smiles. Maria lowered her gaze, gripping the mop handle until her palms stung. She had always endured insults with silence, but now the silence was thinning, wearing away like chalk dust after a long day. Sophia sat quietly in the back row, swinging her feet. Her small frame looked swallowed by the seat, but her eyes followed everything. Whitmore's hands, the chalk, the restless crowd. Maria could see her daughter's excitement barely contained, her notebook already open, waiting. Whitmore launched into another proof, her movements fast, almost frantic. The chalk squeaked with each stroke. Maria watched the lines form on the board, saw the familiar drift toward error. Her stomach tightened. She knew where this was going, and so did some of the sharper students. They were already leaning forward, waiting for the collapse. Halfway through, a boy raised his hand. "Professor, isn't that the same path as yesterday?" Whitmore froze. The room held its breath. She turned slowly, smile tight. "You must be mistaken. This is an entirely different method." Maria saw it. Saw the corner Whitmore was painting herself into again. The proof would implode within 5 more steps. Whitmore knew it too. Her voice grew louder, harsher, as if volume could mask inevitability. Priya slipped quietly into the hall, tablet in hand. She leaned against the wall, observing not just Whitmore, but the way the students kept glancing at Maria. Their suspicion was spreading faster than rumor. It was crystallizing into belief. Sophia, unable to contain herself, whispered too loudly, "Mom, she's doing it wrong again." Heads turned. Heat flushed through Maria's cheeks. She motioned frantically for her daughter to hush, but the damage was done. Whitmore's head snapped up, eyes narrowing like a hawk. "What did you say?" she demanded. The room stilled. Sophia shrank back, clutching her notebook. Maria stepped between them instinctively. "She didn't mean anything," Maria said evenly. Whitmore's lip curled. "Perhaps you should teach your child the difference between respect and ignorance." A ripple of disapproval moved through the students. One girl whispered, "That's too harsh." Another muttered, "She's a kid." Maria met Whitmore's glare, calm but unyielding. "My daughter knows what she sees," she said softly. "That's not ignorance." The students' eyes widened. It was subtle, but Maria felt the room shift. For the first time, she hadn't deflected, she had pushed back. And in doing so, she had placed herself squarely in Whitmore's line of fire. Whitmore turned back to the board, face flushed. She hurried through the next steps, but as Maria had foreseen, the equations collapsed. The final line contradicted itself, glaring and undeniable. The silence that followed was heavier than any laughter. A boy in the second row raised his phone. "That's the third time this week," he whispered, forgetting to be discreet. The chalk slipped from Whitmore's hand, clattering to the floor. Maria's pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted to disappear into her mop and bucket, to retreat back into invisibility. But the whispers were louder now, students looking between Whitmore and her, as though the truth might be hiding in plain sight. Priya cleared her throat gently. "Perhaps we should pause here." Her eyes flicked to Maria for the briefest moment. Then she turned back to Whitmore. "We'll reconvene. Once you've had a chance to review," Whitmore bristled. "I don't need review." Her voice cracked. She swept her notes into a folder and stormed out, heels echoing down the hall. The room erupted in murmurs. Phones buzzed, students typing furiously, videos already uploading. A few lingered, their eyes darting toward Maria. She gripped the mop harder, head bowed, but her daughter's whisper carried louder than any crowd. "Mom, you should have fixed it." That night, Maria lay awake long after Sophia had drifted to sleep. The city hummed outside, streetlights casting pale stripes across the wall. She opened the old folder again, fingers trembling as she touched her name on faded stationery. Dr. Maria Alvarez. The proof Whitmore had butchered was there too, scribbled in her old notes, flawless in its elegance. She pressed the pages to her chest. The ember inside her was no longer just burning. It was demanding. The world was circling toward a moment she couldn't avoid. And when that moment came, she would not erase the chalk. She would let the truth stand. Maria woke before dawn. The city still wrapped in darkness. The folder lay open on the small kitchen table, its papers spread like fragile relics. She traced her name across the old letter again. Dr. Maria Alvarez, as though it might vanish if she blinked. For years, she had hidden that identity, packed away with the bitterness of layoffs and abandonment. Now, with students whispering her daughter's words through hallways, the silence no longer held. Sophia stirred on the couch, rubbing her eyes. She padded over in her pajamas, clutching her worn notebook. "You didn't sleep," she murmured. Maria smiled faintly. "I was remembering." Her daughter leaned close, peering at the pages of neatly written proofs. "These look like the ones she tried." Maria's chest tightened. "They are, except done correctly." Sophia frowned, small brows furrowing. "Then why don't you just show everyone?" Maria hesitated, watching the dim light creep across the table. "Because timing matters. Truth without timing can be dangerous." That day at the university, the atmosphere was different. Students clustered in corners, phones buzzing with updates about Whitmore's repeated failures. Snippets of conversation floated everywhere. "She's losing it. Someone else must know the answer." And woven through it, more and more often, Maria's name, or at least the janitor, spoken with awe instead of ridicule. As Maria wheeled her cart past the library, she overheard two graduate assistants debating. Priya said the janitor corrected her daughter's notes. That's not coincidence. She must have studied before. Maybe even taught Maria quickened her pace, heat rising in her face. Each rumor was a thread unraveling her carefully kept disguise. When evening came, the lecture hall buzzed before Whitmore even arrived. Students filled seats early, some already recording. As though expecting another collapse, Maria moved between rows with her rag and spray, ignoring the camera phones that tilted slightly toward her. She felt them watching, waiting, as if she carried the missing proof in her pocket. Whitmore swept into the room, her heels striking sharp notes against the tile. Her smile was brittle, stretched tight across her face. "Let's dispel the nonsense floating around campus," she announced, slamming her folder onto the desk. "Mathematics is not decided by gossip." The class quieted. Maria froze mid-swipe of a desk, her rag damp in her hand. She knew what was coming. The professor would force another proof. Desperate to reclaim control, sure enough, Whitmore scrawled a fresh set of equations on the board. Her movements were fast, almost reckless, chalk snapping in her grip. Maria's eyes followed instinctively, already mapping where it would fall apart. The students leaned in, hungry for another spectacle. Halfway through, the inevitable happened. The numbers buckled, the balance lost. Whitmore's smile faltered. She tried to backtrack, but her steps only deepened the contradiction. The room rippled with whispers. Phones recorded. Someone muttered, "She's doing it again." From the corner, Sophia whispered far too loudly, "Mom knows how to fix it." Every head turned. Maria's breath caught in her throat. The silence was thick, suffocating. She wanted to sink into the floor, to vanish. But Sophia's small face shone with pure certainty, her voice unshaken. The ember inside Maria roared to life. Whitmore turned, eyes blazing. "Your daughter's imagination seems to be running wild," she said with a cold laugh. "Unless you'd like to demonstrate, Janitor?" The student stirred, a mixture of shock and anticipation, sparking through the room. Cameras rose higher. Priya appeared in the doorway again, her gaze sharp, waiting. Maria gripped the rag so tightly it nearly tore. She wanted to say no, to retreat, but the weight of Sophia's trust pressed heavier than fear. Her daughter believed in her, believed she could stand against this storm. That mattered more than humiliation. She stepped forward slowly, each footfall echoing. She didn't reach for the chalk, not yet. Instead, she spoke softly, steady. "It's not imagination. It's a sign error. Flip it." And the proof converges. A gasp rippled through the room. The correction was so simple, so direct, that even the sharper students immediately recognized it. Eyes widened. Phones zoomed closer. Whitmore's face blanched. "That's absurd!" she snapped, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Maria didn't push further. She stepped back, returning to her cart, letting the words hang in the air like a bell's echo. She didn't need to prove everything yet. The seed was planted, undeniable, in front of witnesses. Sophia beamed from her seat, pride radiating brighter than any light. Priya's eyes lingered on Maria, not with suspicion now, but with something closer to respect. The tide had turned. That night, Maria sat at the kitchen table again, folder open, chalk dust still faint on her fingertips. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to hide. The world was circling toward a reckoning, and when the final moment came, she would be ready to step fully into the light. Maria kept the folder on the kitchen table, its papers spread like open wounds. The proof she had once lectured with, the letters that once carried her title, all of it stared back at her. She no longer shoved it into the cupboard as if ashamed. Tonight, she studied the pages with a pen in hand, adding small notations as though she had never left academia. Sophia leaned over the table, her eyes wide, following every line her mother drew. "Are you going to show them?" Sophia whispered, voice tinged with awe. Maria tapped the pen against the page. When the time comes, she looked at her daughter, steady. The truth doesn't just need to be right. It needs to be undeniable. At the university the next day, whispers had grown into waves. Maria felt them at every corner. Students leaning closer, conversations cutting off when she entered, even staff eyeing her curiously. The story had moved beyond rumor. It had become a narrative. The janitor who corrected the professor. The child who said her mother knew. And the truth, Maria realized, was that people wanted to believe it. They wanted an underdog with hidden brilliance. Whitmore stormed through the halls that morning with her head high, but her confidence looked brittle, like glass under pressure. Maria watched from her cart as the professor snapped at a secretary for misplacing a file. Every movement Whitmore made carried an edge of desperation. In the evening, the lecture hall buzzed louder than before. Students packed every seat, phones raised before Whitmore even entered. They weren't here for the lecture, they were here for the spectacle. Maria wheeled her cart in slowly, pretending to focus on wiping desks, though every nerve in her body felt the scrutiny. Whitmore strode to the board, determined, chalk gripped like a weapon. "Tonight," she announced, "I'll demonstrate the elegance of order." Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced a smile. Maria recognized the structure immediately. The same proof, dressed in different symbols. Whitmore was trying again, desperate to erase the memory of failure. The chalk screeched. Students shifted restlessly. Within minutes, the contradiction appeared again, glaring to anyone who looked closely. A boy in the front row raised his hand. "Professor, that doesn't add up." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Silence. Watch closely." But the murmurs grew. Someone whispered, "She's wrong again." Another muttered, "Ask the janitor." Maria froze. She hadn't moved a step. Yet all eyes turned toward her as if summoned by gravity. Her palms dampened against the rag. She felt Sophia's gaze from the back row, shining with trust. Whitmore followed their eyes. "Enough!" she snapped. "This nonsense about the janitor ends now." Maria lifted her chin, calm but unshaken. Nonsense ends when mistakes stop being repeated. The words cut through the room like a blade. Students gasped, phones recording every second. Priya appeared in the doorway again, her arms folded, expression unreadable, but watchful. Whitmore's face flushed crimson. "If you're so certain, why don't you solve it?" Her voice dripped with scorn. Maria didn't move toward the chalkboard. Not yet. Instead, she spoke evenly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Flip the sign." The convergence holds. Without it, you collapse every time a stunned silence followed. Then murmurs, louder, rising, students nodding, whispering, "She's right." That's the fix. Whitmore's hands trembled, chalk snapping in half. "Coincidence," she hissed, though no one looked convinced. Maria turned back to her cart, leaving the words to echo. She didn't need to prove more yet. Not tonight. Timing still mattered. Later, back in their apartment, Maria sat with Sophia on the couch. Her daughter nestled against her, notebook balanced on her lap. "They're gonna see, Mom," she said softly. "They already do." Maria kissed her forehead. "Then we prepare. The moment will come." She returned to the folder on the table, spreading her old notes into organized piles. She rehearsed silently, equations flowing through her mind like an old language rediscovered. Her hands, steady and precise, remembered every curve of chalk, every cadence of lecture. The ember inside her was now a controlled flame, ready to burn at the right spark. For the first time, she let herself imagine it. Not humiliation, not retreat, but standing before them all, chalk in hand, solving what Whitmore could not. She imagined the silence, the revelation, the moment her daughter's pride would be mirrored in every watching face. "Mom," Sophia whispered, half asleep, "promise you'll show them." Maria placed a hand over her daughter's. "I promise." The city lights outside flickered faintly against the window. Tomorrow would bring another challenge, another confrontation. And when it came, Maria would be ready. Not with silence, but with truth. If you've stayed with Maria's journey this far, subscribe now. The moment of reckoning is near, and you won't want to miss how the truth finally turns the tables. The promise Maria whispered to her daughter lingered in the air the next morning, heavier than any weight she carried in her mop bucket. She had spoken it aloud. "I promise." No retreat, no excuses. The ember that had smoldered for years was now a steady flame, and she felt it warming every step as she entered the university lobby. The building buzzed like a hive. Students crowded stairwells, their conversations circling the same rumor: Whitmore's unraveling. A headline on a student blog blared across glowing screens. "Proof of failure. Professor stumbles again." Beneath the headline, comments surged. "The janitor was right. Why's she hiding?" Maria pushed her cart through the tide of whispers, keeping her head low, but she could feel their eyes clinging to her like static. By afternoon, she was called to the faculty wing to clean the conference room. The mahogany table gleamed under her rag, reflecting the stern portraits of past deans staring down from their gilded frames. Voices rose from behind the closed doors of a smaller meeting chamber, sharp, clipped, and unmistakable. "These rumors are out of control," Whitmore's voice seethed. "I will not be undermined by a janitor and a child's notebook." Priya's calmer tone followed. "Elaine, the problem isn't the rumor. The problem is that the correction was right. Students see it. They talk. You can't erase it." Maria froze mid-swipe, the rag dripping faintly onto the polished wood. Her heart thudded in her chest. Priya knew. Whitmore knew. And soon, everyone would know. The door opened abruptly. Whitmore stepped out, folder clutched tight, her eyes sharp as blades when they landed on Maria. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Whitmore sneered, "Careful with that rag. It's the only proof you'll ever handle." She swept past without waiting for a reply. Maria inhaled slowly, grounding herself. The insult cut, but it no longer crushed her. She had her promise to keep and her daughter's faith to honor. That evening, the lecture hall was standing room only. Word had spread beyond the department. Even students from other faculties squeezed into the aisles. The air vibrated with expectation. Phones ready, cameras already aimed. Maria wheeled her cart in quietly, every head turning to track her movement. Sophia clutched her notebook in the back row, her small hands trembling with anticipation. Whitmore entered moments later, her heels striking like hammers on tile. She didn't bother with greetings. She strode straight to the board and began writing furiously, chalk dust clouding the air. "Tonight," she declared, "you'll see clarity restored." But Maria saw it unravel before the first 10 lines were written. Whitmore was forcing the same structure again, dressed in different symbols, but the flaw remained. The crowd murmured, the tension thickened. "Mom," Sophia whispered, her voice carrying through the hush. "It's wrong again." Every head turned. Maria's breath caught. She felt the tide shift toward her, as if the entire hall leaned in her direction. Priya stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her gaze fixed not on Whitmore, but on Maria. Whitmore whirled, eyes blazing. "You!" she snapped, pointing directly at Maria. If you claim to know, then prove it. Right now, gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted higher. The challenge had been thrown, and there would be no retreat. Maria's hand shook as she set the rag onto her cart. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. For a moment, fear clawed at her. Fear of exposure. Fear of stepping into a light she had avoided for years. But then she saw Sophia, eyes wide, whispering. "You promised." Maria stepped forward. The murmurs swelled, filling the hall with electricity. She stopped at the base of the board, chalk dust thick in the air. She didn't reach for the chalk yet. She lifted her head, meeting Whitmore's glare calmly. "Mathematics isn't about pride," Maria said, her voice steady. "It's about truth. And truth doesn't care what title you wear." The room erupted in whispers. But Maria stood firm, waiting. Whitmore thrust the chalk toward her like a weapon. "Then show us." Maria took it slowly, feeling the old weight in her hand. Her fingers remembered the texture instantly, as though no time had passed. She stood before the half-finished proof, scanning the lines, then drew 3 swift corrections. The room fell silent, breathless. The contradiction evaporated. The series balanced. The proof stood clean, elegant, irrefutable. Phones captured every stroke. Students gasped aloud. One boy whispered, "She solved it." Another said, "It's perfect." Whitmore's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Maria set the chalk back onto the tray gently. She turned, not to Whitmore, but to her daughter in the back row. Sophia's eyes glistened with pride, her smile radiant. Maria walked calmly back to her cart, her voice carrying one final truth. Respect is earned, not demanded, even from a janitor. The lecture hall erupted, not in laughter this time, but in applause. The applause thundered through the lecture hall, rattling the air like a storm breaking loose. Maria gripped the cart's handle, her knuckles white, as the sound washed over her. For years, she had swallowed silence, lived in shadows, erased every trace of the woman she once was. Now, in front of hundreds of witnesses, the truth had slipped out like lightning, and there was no pulling it back. Whitmore stood frozen at the board, her jaw tight, eyes flicking from the corrected proof to the students still cheering. Pride battled panic across her face, but panic was winning. She banged the chalk tray with her palm. "Enough!" she barked, her voice cracking. This is nonsense. A trick. You applaud a custodian who knows nothing of rigor?" The applause faltered into uneasy murmurs. Maria turned slowly, her voice calm but unyielding. "It wasn't a trick. It was the correction your students deserved to see. Phones caught every word, cameras gleaming like dozens of tiny mirrors reflecting her back at herself." Maria steadied her breath. The flame inside her no longer flickered. It blazed. Whitmore's face reddened. "You think one correction makes you my equal?" Maria didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she looked toward the rows of students. Truth doesn't ask permission to exist. It simply does. The murmurs rose again, this time not against her, but in agreement. Priya stepped forward from the doorway, her heels clicking softly against the tile. Her voice was low, but carried. "Elaine, the department can't ignore this any longer. We need to talk." Whitmore spun toward her. "You'd side with her?" Priya's expression stayed calm, but her eyes lingered on Maria. "I side with mathematics. And what's correct?" The room shifted, power rebalancing itself. Maria felt it, like air before a storm. Whitmore sensed it too, and her fury only deepened. Maria returned to her cart, lifting her rag with steady hands, though her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to retreat, to shrink back into invisibility. But retreat was no longer possible. The secret was out. The proof stood undeniable. The janitor had solved what the professor could not. Whitmore slammed her folder shut. This ends here. Tomorrow, I'll prove it again in the auditorium, in front of faculty and students alike. And when I do, this fantasy collapses. The challenge hung heavy. Students erupted in chatter, already planning to attend. Priya's eyes met Maria's, full of unspoken understanding. The final reckoning was coming. That night, in their apartment, Sophia perched on the couch, notebook clutched to her chest. "You showed them," she whispered, pride glowing in her face. "You kept your promise." Maria sat beside her, folding her daughter into her arms. "I did, but it isn't finished. Tomorrow will be louder, harsher, and we'll face it together." Sophia leaned against her. "I'm not scared." Maria kissed her forehead. "Then neither am I." Later, after Sophia slept, Maria sat again at the kitchen table, her old folder spread wide. She reread every proof she had once written, every note scratched in margins. The paper smelled faintly of age, of years locked away. She picked up a pencil and began writing again, line by line, like muscles flexing after a long rest. Equations unfolded naturally, her hand steady, her mind sharp. She wasn't rusty, she was ready. The next morning, the university's largest auditorium was already packed when she arrived. The air buzzed with expectation. Phones lifted like lanterns. The story had spread too far to contain. Even faculty members sat in the front rows, murmuring to each other. Maria entered quietly with her cart, Sophia at her side. The room rippled with whispers the moment they appeared. Some nodded respectfully. Others just stared, wide-eyed at the woman they once ignored. Whitmore strode in soon after, dressed impeccably, her scarf a bold red meant to radiate authority. She slammed her folder on the podium. "Today," she announced, "you'll see that gossip doesn't outweigh knowledge." Students leaned forward, their phones ready. Maria stood at the side aisle, her cart parked, her daughter gripping her hand tightly. She didn't need to speak yet. The stage was Whitmore's, for now, but the weight of expectation shifted toward her like a tide. Whitmore attacked the board, chalk striking like a weapon, each line sharp but frantic. She forced her way down the same doomed path. The flaw loomed, waiting, inevitable. Murmurs grew. Students shook their heads. Maria felt the flames surge inside her. The moment was nearing. And when the collapse came, there would be no hiding, no silence, only truth. If you want to see the moment when silence shatters and dignity stands tall, subscribe now, because tomorrow, Maria's reckoning will burn brighter than chalk dust ever could. The auditorium pulsed with anticipation. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the chalkboard where Whitmore's hand moved with frantic precision. Chalk squealed, snapping twice under the pressure of her grip. She pasted a smile across her face, but her movements betrayed her. Fast, jagged, unsteady. Every stroke carved her deeper into the same flawed path. Maria stood at the side aisle, her cart parked discreetly against the wall, Sophia's small hand clasped in hers. The murmur of students swelled with each misstep, Whitmore scrawled. A restless tide rising louder than the hum of the overhead lights. Phones were everywhere, glowing like constellations, recording every heartbeat of the confrontation. The inevitable happened. The contradiction surfaced mid-line, glaring and undeniable. Numbers collapsed into nonsense. Gasps rippled across the auditorium, followed by sharp whispers. "She did it again." "That's wrong. Ask the janitor." Whitmore froze, then turned sharply, eyes latching onto Maria like daggers. "If you're so convinced, then enlighten us," she hissed, voice trembling under the weight of exposure. Since the crowd seems to think you're the oracle of mathematics? The words ignited the room. Students erupted in claps, chants rising. Show us! Let her solve it! A chant began in the back rows, rolling forward like thunder. Janitor! Janitor! Maria's stomach clenched. For a heartbeat, she wanted to flee, to retreat into silence. But then she felt her daughter's hand squeeze hers, small fingers trembling, yet sure. Sophia's voice rose above the din, clear and fearless. Mom, you promised. The auditorium stilled. The chant died down into breathless expectation. Maria stepped forward, each step echoing across the floor, louder than the murmurs. She reached the front, standing beside Whitmore, who tried to tower over her with posture alone. Maria didn't look at her. She turned to the audience, her voice steady. Truth belongs to no one person, not to a title, not to a uniform. It belongs to those who honor it. The applause thundered, rattling the seats. Maria reached for the chalk. Her hand no longer shook. It remembered. She scanned the ruined proof, then lifted the chalk, correcting in 3 clean strokes. Flipped the sign. Balance restored. Convergence achieved. Gasps erupted, followed by a roar of clapping. Phones caught every movement, cameras zooming in as the contradiction vanished before their eyes. The equation stood complete, elegant, irrefutable. Whitmore's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, stammered, "Coincidence? Trick?" But her voice cracked. The room drowned her out. Students stood, clapping, cheering, some even chanting Maria's name now. Alvarez! Alvarez! Maria placed the chalk gently back into the tray. She turned, not to Whitmore, but to her daughter in the front row, whose eyes shone with pride, tears glittering. She gave Sophia the faintest nod, a promise kept. Priya stepped onto the stage, her voice carrying over the noise. "Dr. Alvarez," she said deliberately, "your correction is flawless." And timely, a hush swept the room, heavier than the applause. The title hung there, doctor, not janitor, not rumor, truth. Whitmore stumbled back, shaking her head. "This is absurd," she sputtered. "She cleans floors." Maria faced her finally, calm and unyielding. "Yes, I clean floors. I raise a daughter. And I honor truth when it matters. That's more than you've done here." The crowd erupted again, their voices a wall of sound. Some faculty in the front rows exchanged startled looks, others nodding reluctantly. The tide had turned, not in whispers this time, but in public, undeniable exposure. Whitmore's power crumbled in real time, her authority dissolving under the gaze of witnesses. She tried to gather her notes, hands fumbling, but dropped them across the stage. Papers fluttered like fallen feathers. The audience barely noticed. Their attention belonged to Maria now. Sophia ran down the aisle, notebook clutched in her arms, and flung herself into her mother's embrace. Maria held her tightly, her own tears burning hot but steady. Around them, the applause grew louder, echoing through the rafters, a wave that wouldn't stop. Priya leaned in close, her voice low but firm. "The department will have to act, and when they do, your name deserves its place back on the board." Maria met her eyes, then looked out over the crowd. She didn't need a title to know her dignity had been restored. But for Sophia, for the promise she had made, she would no longer bury who she was. Whitmore staggered off the stage, swallowed by the noise. Maria remained, steady, holding her daughter, the corrected proof shining behind her like a banner. The reckoning had arrived, and this time, she hadn't erased the chalk. The roar of the auditorium still rang in Maria's ears as she guided Sophia through the crowded hallways. Students swarmed around them, some reaching out to pat her shoulder, others simply whispering as she passed. "She solved it, Dr. Alvarez, the janitor who wasn't just a janitor. Maria, held her daughter's hand firmly, steadying both of them against the tidal wave of attention. For years, she had lived in silence, letting her brilliance gather dust like the chalkboard she cleaned. Tonight, that silence had shattered, and the pieces gleamed brighter than she could have imagined. Backstage, Priya caught up to her. She pressed a hand to Maria's arm, eyes shining. "You don't know what you've done tonight." "They'll remember this for years," Maria shook her head gently. "I didn't do it for them." She glanced down at Sophia, who clutched her notebook proudly against her chest. "I did it for her, so she'll never think silence is safer than truth." Priya nodded, her gaze softening. "Still, the faculty council will convene. Elaine can't bury this, not with the entire student body as witness." She hesitated. "And you'll have my voice in that meeting." Maria met her eyes. Gratitude unspoken, but understood. The ally she had once suspected now stood firmly by her side. When she stepped outside, cool night air wrapped around her. The campus buzzed with energy, students spilling into courtyards, still replaying videos, still marveling at the reversal they had witnessed. Sophia leaned against her, exhausted but glowing with pride. They walked home in silence, but Maria's mind replayed every moment. Whitmore's faltering, the chants of her name, the chalk steady in her hand after years of denial. For so long she had hidden her past, afraid it would only bring pain. Tonight, that past had saved her dignity, restored her voice, and rewritten her daughter's understanding of who she was. At home, Sophia curled into bed, whispering before she drifted off, "You're the smartest person in the world, Mom." Maria smoothed her hair, whispering back, "No, just someone who finally stopped hiding." Later, Maria sat alone at the kitchen table. The folder spread open once more. She traced her name on the old letter, Dr. Maria Alvarez. The paper no longer felt like a reminder of failure. It felt like a beginning. The ember inside her had become a steady fire, one she wouldn't let burn out again. She looked out the window at the city lights, her reflection layered over them. Tomorrow would bring consequences, meetings, scrutiny, maybe even offers she wasn't sure she wanted. But tonight, one truth remained steady. She had faced arrogance, humiliation, and silence, and she had not bowed. She had answered with truth, and the truth had stood. Somewhere across campus, Whitmore sat in her office, surrounded by the ruins of reputation. Maria didn't wish her destruction. She only hoped she would learn what dignity truly meant. Titles, prestige, and arrogance had crumbled in minutes. Honesty had endured. That was lesson enough. Maria closed the folder and placed it back on the shelf. Not hidden, not buried, but ready for its place in the light. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. For the first time in years, she felt whole. The story of the janitor, who wasn't just a janitor, would echo across the halls long after chalk dust settled. Students would whisper it, professors would debate it, and Sophia would carry it in her heart forever. And Maria, she would walk into tomorrow not as a ghost of who she once was, but as herself, flawed, resilient, and unafraid. Now it's your turn. What title should we tackle next? Subscribe, and don't miss our next story. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?